So this happened last fall when I drove up to Craggy Gardens Trailhead on the Blue Ridge Parkway. What started out as just a late evening hike turned into something I can't explain, something I can't even escape no matter how many times I try, because the sound never stops and the whispers always follow. And if you're listening to this right now in the dark with your headphones on, you're already part. But you're listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So this happened last fall when I drove up to the Blue Ridge Parkway Trailhead at Craggy Gardens in North Carolina on October 21st, 2022 at 5:42 p.m. And yeah, I know the exact time because I had glanced at the dash clock when I pulled into the lot and killed the ignition, and the memory of that red glow has been burned into me like the afterimage of a camera flash. Only this one never really goes away. He was chasing that early twilight light that you only get in October. The air smells of dead leaves and the ridge lines look like someone brushed a watercolor painting across the sky, and I thought it would be a mellow hike, just a couple of hours on the trail, maybe make it back to the car with a little daylight left, or worst case hike back with my headlamp if it got dark too quick. I've done that before without any issue, no big deal. No reason to feel uneasy. The parking lot wasn't full. Maybe 3 other cars scattered across the gravel pull-off. I could hear the crunch of boots on the leaves from one group of hikers, already heading back toward their vehicles, laughing and talking loud, their voices echoing strangely in the thinning air. And once they left, it got quiet in that way. The mountains get quiet, like sound just drifts away into the valleys and doesn't come back, leaving you alone with the wind and your own breath. Angie strapped on my pack, tightened my boots, and hit the trailhead marker. The wooden sign carved with Craggy Gardens Trail, the letters worn down by weather, paint faded. A few gouged that looked too sharp to be from animals, but too deep to be from careless knives. Maybe just weathering, but something about them caught my eye and made me brush my hand over the grooves, like I was trying to smooth them out. The trail itself started gentle, weaving through rhododendron tunnels, their twisted limbs forming arches that blocked out most of the sky, and the smell of damp earth hung heavy, kind of smell that makes you think of things rotting under the soil, old roots and older bones. Maybe, though at that point I laughed to myself for being dramatic, telling myself I'd been watching too many of those creepy forest videos online. The ones where people vanish without a trace and the rangers give bland statements to the press. Nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of foul play. Just gone about 20 minutes and the canopy opened up and I got my first wide view. The Blue Ridge Mountains rolling out like waves, layers of purple and blue fading into haze, and the sky already dimming faster than I expected, like the sun had dropped behind something too early, even though I knew sunset wasn't for another half hour, maybe more. I checked my phone, but the signal was trash, one bar flickering in and out, enough to remind me that I was technically still connected to the rest of the world, but not enough to rely on if anything went wrong. He kept moving, my boots crunching on gravel, the sound steady, almost hypnotic, until I realized I was pacing. It was something else, another set of steps, softer, just behind me. Not always in sync, but close enough that my brain picked it out as more than just echoes. And when I stopped, it stopped. And when I turned, the trail was empty, the rhododendron still, no deer darting away, no branches bending. Just silence that pressed against my ears until I had to clear my throat. Just to hear something Umani told myself it was just my nerves, that old trick. Presenses where you hike alone and your mind starts filling in shadows with shapes, sounds with patterns, but still I picked up the pace, telling myself I wanted to catch the overlook before the light died, not because I was spooked, not because the air behind me felt just a little colder than the air in front when I reached the clearing near the bald. The wind hit me hard, cold and sharp, carrying that high mountain whistle that cuts between rocks. I finally felt like I could breathe again, space opening up around me, the trail wide. The view massive, no place for anything to hide, or so I thought, until I noticed a stone structure near the edge, the one that looked like an old foundation. Just a rectangle of stacked rock half collapsed, moss growing thick in the cracks, like it had been there longer than the park itself. I'd been here before, years back, but I didn't remember that foundation. I'm not the kind of person to forget landmarks like that, especially something so out of place. Man-made ruins in the middle of a protected trail. It didn't sit right. It drew my eyes the way a loose tooth draws your tongue. You can't help but poke it. Can't help but feel the wrongness. He walked closer, boots scraping stone, and the wind dropped all at once, like someone had cut the sound. Like stepping into a room with padded walls, and the silence felt heavy, pressing down on me. I swear I could hear the blood in my ears louder than my footsteps, louder than my breathing, until it wasn't just blood. It was a low hum, faint at first, then clearer, like a voice buried in static, syllables stretched and warped, not English. Not anything I should have recognized, but carrying a weight that made my chest tighten and my teeth ache. I froze, standing at the edge of the stone rectangle, and the hum cut out sharp, replaced by nothing at all, not even the wind. In that moment I felt it deep in my bones that I had crossed some kind of line. Not a physical one, but something older. Something that didn't care about trail maps or ranger warnings. Something that didn't care that I was just a hiker looking for a view. Light dropped fast. Then, like a curtain pulled, and when I looked back, the trail seemed darker than it should have been. The tunnel of rhododendron already black. Like I'd have to walk into a cave to get out, and my gut told me to leave, to turn back right then, to put my boots on the path and keep going no matter what I thought I heard behind me, no matter what shapes tried to move in the corner of my vision. But before I could step away, I noticed something scratched into the stone itself. Near the base, lines carved deep. Not random, not weathered, deliberate words, but not English. Even letters I could place, though some looked almost like runes, angular and sharp. And as my eyes traced them, I felt that start again, low, in my skull this time, not in the air. And the more I looked, the louder it got, until I staggered back and nearly lost my footing on the slick moss. That's when I saw it. Across the clearing, just at the tree line, a figure, tall and thin too. Thin, arms too long. It tilted like it was listening. No features, just a silhouette darker than been a little near it, like heat rising off asphalt, only this was cold, and the hum in my skull pulsed in rhythm with the way it tilted its head, like it was sensing up with me, like it was pulling my heartbeat into its own cadence. It blinked and it was gone. Just trees again, but the silence didn't lift. I knew I couldn't stay at that foundation any longer, not with the dark pressing in, not with whatever was waiting at the edge of the trees. So I turned back toward the trail, tightened my pack straps, and told myself over and over that I'd make it back to the car, that this was nothing. Just the woods, just my head, but my steps were too loud. And between each crunch of gravel I heard the faintest echo, 1/2 beat behind. Me closer than before, never stopping, never slowing until I started to run. I ran harder than I should have for the grade of that trail, my boots striking the gravel too loud, going between the trees like I was stomping through a hollow drum. My pack thumped against my shoulders with every stride, straps biting, and water bottle clattering, but I didn't dare slow down because that sound, that echo of a second pair of steps, it stayed behind me, always just a beat off, like a shadow that had decided to pick up its own rhythm. And the worst part was, the way it never got fainter, never drifted away. It stayed right there, like it was tethered to meth rhododendron tunnel, swallowed me again. Branches arched overhead like ribs, and the last glow of dusk was gone, replaced with the kind of murky half-light that makes every branch look like an arm in every hollow, like an open mouth. And I yanked out my headlamp with a shaking hand, thumbed it on, and the beam caught nothing but twisting roots and wet leaves, but it didn't make me feel better. If anything, it was worse, because the shadows now stretched long and sharp, moving when I didn't, bending like they were breath. Angie kept telling myself if I just made it back to the parking lot, if I just saw the shape of my car waiting there, I'd be fine. But the trail seemed longer than it had on the way up, like every turn added another stretch I didn't remember, and my lungs started to burn, and my mind was running ahead of me, picturing the lot empty, picturing my car gone, picturing something else standing in the space where I'd parked, tall and thin and whiting. At one point I glanced over my shoulder, just a flash of light from the headlamp, and I swear I saw the trees shift, not sway with the wind, but shift like they had bodies, like trunks bent where there were no joints, and something ducked just out of the beam fast, faster than a deer, faster than anything that big should move. And my foot caught a root and I went down hard, palms scraping against gravel, knees stinging, the lamp beam swinging wild across the underbrush. Froze flat on the ground, sucking in air, listening, and the steps behind me stopped too, perfectly, like they had been waiting for me to fall, like they knew this was the moment to close the distance. And I couldn't help it. I whispered out loud, a cracked voice, "Please don't." And the woods answered with nothing, no wind, no night bird, not even my own echo, just that heavy silence that felt like it was pressing a hand against my mouth. I forced myself up, blood sticky on my knees, palms burning, and I staggered forward, half walking, half running, and the steps picked up again, lighter than mine, but always right there, cadence inescapable, like it was inside me now, my heart sensing to it whether I wanted to or not. And the longer I went, the more I realized it wasn't just footsteps, there was a sound under it. A low vibration, that I could feel more than hear, deep in my chest, ling in my ribs like my bones were the instrument being played when the trees finally thinned, and the light came into view. I almost sobbed from relief. The silver glint of my car and the beam of my lamp looking like salvation, but then I noticed the other vehicles, the three that had been there earlier, they were gone, all of them. Not a single headlight or taillight, just my car alone in that gravel clearing. And something about that emptiness hit me harder than the woods. Like I had missed the last ferry off an island, and everyone else had already escapade sprinted the last few yards, fumbled my keys out, and shaking so bad I dropped them twice, the clink on gravel sounding like a gunshot. I snatched them up and jammed the fob at the door. The click of the lock disengaging loud and the night too loud, and I yanked the handle. Threw myself inside, slammed the door shut, and for a second I just sat there, panting, waiting, expecting to see a face in the window glass or a hand pressed against it, but there was nothing. Only the dark trees watching from the trailhead. He shoved the key in the ignition, turned it, and the engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the lot, lighting up gravel, trees, and something else. Just for a split second at the very edge of the beam, tall and thin, tilting its head. Arms too long, fingers too sharp, and I blinked and it was gone, but I didn't wait to check again. I threw the car in reverse, gravel spitting, then slammed it into drive and peeled out onto the parkway, tires squealing, engine straining, and only when I was a mile down did I realize I was still shaking so bad. I could barely keep the wheel straight. Parkway at night is no joke, tight curves, no guardrails in some places, and the mountains dropping away into black voids. Every turn felt like I was about to miss and sail off into nothing, but I couldn't slow down. Not with that thing maybe still standing back at the trailhead, or worse. Maybe not still standing there, maybe following, maybe already pacing. Me in the trees lining the road. Its head tilting with every bend like it was studying how I moodily drove like that for 20 minutes before I hit a pull-off with a faint glow of light. A scenic overlook with a couple picnic tables and a lamppost. Buzzing dim yellow. I pulled in hard, brakes squealing, heart racing, and just sat there with the engine running. Headlights stabbing into the trees, telling myself I was safe. That whatever I'd seen was just shadows and nerves and exhaustion, that I was fine. But then the hum started again. Faint, coming not from outside, not from the woods, but from the dash of my car through the vents, through the plastic, vibrating the steering wheel under my hands. He killed the engine, twisted the key out, and the hum didn't stop. If anything, it got louder, filling the cabin, buzzing in my teeth, making my vision blur at the edges. And I stumbled out into the night, slammed the door, and leaned against the hood with my breath fogging in the cold air. And for the first time since leaving the trail, I looked up, really looked up, at the sky, and what I saw wasn't the sky I knew. Wasn't the familiar scatter of stars over the Blue Ridge. It was wrong. The constellations bent, twisted, shapes I didn't recognize, lines that shouldn't exist, and the hum shifted higher. Almost musical now, almost like a voice, and I swear, I swear I could hear words forming in it. Words that made sense for a second then dissolved like mist. Words that weren't mine but wanted to be inside me, filling me, hollowing me out so there was room for something else, say, back toward the lamppost. The weak yellow glow buzzing, and I held onto the metal pole like it was a lifeline. Eyes locked on the tree line, half expecting that silhouette to step out, show itself under the artificial light, but nothing moved, nothing came. Only that I'm rolling through me, not in the air anymore, not even in my car, but in me, and that was when I realized I hadn't escaped the trail at all, not really. Because whatever had been waiting in those woods, it had already climbed inside my skin. I clung to that lamppost like it was the last solid thing in the world. My fingers wrapped so tight around the cold metal that my knuckles ached, and the hum inside me just kept rising, not loud in the way a stereo gets loud, but in the way storm pressure builds in your chest, pushing against your lungs until you can't catch a full breath. I remember thinking if I let go of that pole I would float right up and vanish into that broken sky, or worse, sink down into the gravel under my boots, down into the roots and rock where that thing belonged, yet the parking lot was empty, not a single car pulled into the overlook except mine, and the yellow glow from the lamppost fell thin, like it didn't really reach far, like the darkness between the trees just bent around it and waited for me to step away. And I kept looking back toward my car, the headlights still cutting the woods, the engine dead now. But the way the light beams hit the branches, they almost looked like arms. Like dozens of arms reaching, and when I blinked it shifted. And for half a heartbeat I thought I saw faces in the bark, stretched and frozen, mouths open in silent screamsy. Don't know how long I stood there, gripping that pole, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the hum to change. But eventually my hands went numb from the cold and my legs shook from exhaustion. I realized I couldn't just stay like that. I had to move, had to decide. And the thought of climbing back into that car with the hum still rattling the dash made me sick to my stomach, but the thought of walking away into the dark was worse. So I forced myself back toward the driver's side, every step like wading through molasses. Every shadow a threat. When I opened the door, the hum was still there, softer now, more like a whisper, like it had retreated just enough to let me think it was gone. I slid behind the wheel, slammed the door shut, and sat with the key in my hand, staring at the ignition. Because part of me knew if I started the car again, something would happen, something final. Like I'd already crossed too many lines tonight, and turning that engine over would be the last bit. I did it anyway, because the idea of staying still was worse, so I shoved the key in and twisted. And the headlights flared, the engine roared, and the hum surged with it, not through the speakers. Not through the vents, but through me, like the car and I had become the same body. Like the vibration in the steering wheel was my own heartbeat amplified. I couldn't separate myself from the machine anymore. I was inside it, and it was inside me. And the thought made my teeth ache like they were going to split. He pulled out onto the parkway again. Tires crunching gravel, and the curves of the road swallowed me in black. The lamppost behind me vanishing like it had never existed. And the longer I drove, the stranger the road felt. The lines on the asphalt not matching what I remembered. Stretches longer, curves sharper, tunnels where there shouldn't be tunnels. Short bursts of stone walls with graffiti I didn't recognize. Symbols cut in spray paint that matched. But I'd seen scratched on the stone back at the foundation. Angular, jagged, almost vibrating in the glare of my headlights. At one point the fog rolled in, thick and sudden like a wall, and when I drove into it the world outside the glass ceased to exist. Number stars, no trees, no mountains, just white swallowing everything, and I slowed to a crawl, leaning forward over the wheel because I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, and the hum shifted again, deeper now, a growl beneath the static. And then I heard it, voice layered under the vibration, not words at first, just the cadence of speech, like someone trying to remember how to talk after a long silence, and then clear as anything. I heard my name. I gripped the wheel so tight I thought I'd snap. My heart slamming against my ribs, because hearing your own name in a voice that isn't a voice, that's not something you can rationalize. That's not deer in the brush or branches cracking. That's something that knows you, and the worst part was the way it sounded. Not like a stranger, but like someone I used to know, someone I couldn't place. Familiar enough to sting, like the memory of a dream you can't shake. A fog broke for a moment and I saw a shape in the middle of the road, tall, thin, arms too long, head tilted, and I swerved hard, tires screaming, car lurching sideways. Gravel spitting from the shoulder, and when I glanced back in the mirror, there was nothing there. No figure, no fog, just empty black road stretching behind me, but my chest still hurt from the way my heart had slammed against it, and my breath came in ragged gasps. He wanted to stop, pull over, turn around, anything. But the parkway at night doesn't give you choices. The pull-offs are rare, and the woods close in on both sides. And the further I went, the more I realized the mile markers weren't adding up. The numbers didn't match the stretch I knew. I'd driven this route a dozen times before, and it should have been familiar, but now it felt endless. Like I was trapped in a loop of asphalt and trees that never changed, only twisted a little more each mile, branches arching closer to the road, shadows stretching longer into my headlights. Voice came again, this time clearer, layered, like multiple mouths speaking in unison, all trying to pronounce the same syllables. And it wasn't just my name anymore. It was a question, though. The words didn't make sense. The cadence did, the inflection rising at the end. And the hum pushed the question straight into my skull. Against every instinct I had, I almost answered, almost spoke out loud in that car. But something deep inside me screamed not to, screamed that the second I gave it my voice it would own more than just my name. I pressed harder on the gas, engine whining, speed climbing past what was safe for the curves, and the forest blurred into streaks. And still the parkway wouldn't end, still no sign of the turnoffs I knew, no ranger station, no exit, nothing but curve after curve. The higher I went, the more the stars above shifted, bending in ways they shouldn't, moving too fast, and my stomach lurched because I realized it wasn't the stars moving, it was me. The whole road rising, twisting, carrying me somewhere. Wasn't on any map when the hum peaked, rattling my bones, shaking my vision. I thought for sure the car was going to come apart under me. Bolts snapping, tires shredding, glass vibrating to dust, but instead it leveled smooth. And the fog cleared again, and I saw something ahead, not a curve, not a tunnel, but lights. Faint at first, then brighter, a cluster of warm yellow glowing through the trees, and for a moment, just a fleeting second, relief flooded me. Because it looked like cabins, like ranger housing, like civilization he slowed. Pulled toward the side road leading to the lights, gravel crunching under my tires. And the closer I got, the more I saw details. Not cabins, not houses, but something older. Stone walls half collapsed. Firelight flickering in pits dug into the ground, and figures standing around them, tall and thin. Dozens of them, heads tilted in perfect unison, arms to long, fingers to sharp, and as my headlights swept across them, every single one turned to look at me. And the hum in my chest surged into a chorus of voices, all speaking at once, all in rhythm, and every voice was mine. I hit the brakes hard when those shapes all turned toward me, gravel spraying, tires squealing, and for a second the car fishtailed like it was going to slide right into the pit of firelight. They circled, and in that sliver of time every figure tilted its head to the exact same angle. The movement so smooth and rehearsed it was like watching a flock of birds change direction mid-air. And the hum in my chest synced perfectly with the tilt, like I was the one moving my head even though I knew I was gripping the wheels straight ahead. Jaw locked, eyes wet with firelight painted their forms wrong, stretching shadows to far, making those long arms look endless. And though their bodies were tall, they didn't move like people. Their weight shifted in ways that didn't match. Bones to fluid, like their joints bent in both directions at once. And though they had no clear faces, I swear the light reflected off eyes. Dozens of eyes glinting at me like wet stone, and every one of them burned into me unblinking. Waiting to jam the shifter into reverse, slammed the gas, and the car leapt back onto the parkway. Tires screaming as I fought the wheel, but when I looked in the mirror the lights were gone. No fire pits, no figures, just black road and black trees, and that felt worse than seeing them. Because if they could vanish like that, then they weren't bound by space the way I was. And the thought made my stomach twist until bile rose in my throat and I had to swallow it down. The hum didn't leave though, it crawled higher, sharper, almost like laughter. A dozen layered voices inside my skull mocking every thought I tried to hold on to. I realized I couldn't tell if my heart was still my own rhythm or if it had been replaced entirely by that sound. I gripped the wheel tighter until my knuckles ached and muttered over and over, "For me, not for me, not for me," like a broken breeder. I don't know how long I drove after that. The road twisting, climbing, dropping, never ending. I tried to remember landmarks, but they blurred together. Stone walls, tunnels, pull-offs, all repeating, like the parkway had folded in on itself and was looping me through the same stretch of asphalt, again and again. And the odometer kept climbing even though I never seemed to get closer to any exit. Like the miles were piling up, but I wasn't leaving. At some point my headlamp beam from the car caught something carved into the road itself, not painted lines, not cracks, but actual grooves in the asphalt, symbols. The same angular shapes I had seen on the stone foundation up at Craggy Gardens, only stretched across the entire width of the highway, glowing faintly in the glare like they were cut fresh. And when my tires rolled over them, the hum surged so strong my vision widened. My hands went numb on the wheel, and for one horrifying second I didn't know if I was still in my body, or if something else had climbed inside it. When the whiteness faded, I was no longer on the parkway. Not exactly, because the trees were gone, replaced with towering stone walls rising on both sides. Walls that looked like they belonged underground, wet and rough, glistening with something that reflected the headlights, and the road itself dipped, curved, sloped downward into what looked like a tunnel that had no end. And though I slammed the brakes, the car kept sliding, pulled by some force deeper and deeper. And the hum turned to a chant, hundreds of voices now, not all mine, some higher, some deeper, all layering into one impossible sound. He wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat clamped shut, and the air inside the car grew thick, damp, smelling of soil and rot, like a basement flooded with old leaves, and my breath fogged the glass. The air wasn't cold, and then I saw movement along the stone walls. Figures pressed into the rock itself, bodies half buried, arms reaching out, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes glowing faint as they turned to watch me slide past. And one face among them made my stomach drop because it looked familiar. It looked like mine, twisted and stretched, but mine. All the Samoth slope leveled, and the car rolled into a vast chamber, the headlights spilling across a floor that wasn't asphalt anymore, but cracked stone carved with the same runes over and over. And the center of the chamber was that same rectangle foundation I had seen on the trail, only whole this time, walls unbroken, a black doorway cut into the center. As my headlights hit it, something stepped out, tall, thin, arms dragging along the ground, yet tilting in that way I couldn't stop seeing. Even when I closed my eyes, it stood there waiting. And though I should have thrown the car in reverse and floored it, I couldn't move. My hand stuck to the wheel, my foot frozen on the brake, and the figure raised one long arm, pointed straight at me, and the hum in my chest broke into clear words for the first time, not layered, not distorted, but sharp and cutting. You came back, you don't remember making the choice, but I shoved the shifter into park, opened the door, and stepped out, the stone floor wet under my boots, the air heavy and pressing. And the hum didn't just vibrate me anymore, it guided me, pulling me forward like strings tied to my ribs. I walked toward that black doorway in the stone without a single thought of turning back. Because whatever this was, it had already decided I belonged to it. When I reached the doorway, the figure stepped aside, tilting its head in a mockery. Welcome, and inside the blackness I saw more figures, dozens, maybe hundreds. Their arms raised, their voices layered into a single call. In the rhythm of their chant, I finally understood what they had been asking me all along. The question layered under my name, the thing they needed me to answer. And the terror wasn't in not knowing, but in realizing that deep inside I already did. Like the memory had been carved into me long before I ever set foot on that trail. The words formed in my throat without permission, rising against my will, scraping like broken glass. and the instant I let them out, the chamber shook, the walls vibrating, dust falling from the stone, and the figures inside the doorway surged forward with their arms outstretched. I knew then that answering had never been about communication. It had been about consent, about opening a door. They couldn't open themselves, and I had just unlatched it. The moment those words left my throat, the air inside that chamber pressed in so hard. I thought my ribs would crack. The hum exploded into something so loud it wasn't even sound anymore. It was pressure, it was weight, it was the crushing silence. Being buried alive, and yet it was filled with voices, hundreds, maybe thousands. Some in sync with mine, some screaming, some whispering. All of them pulling through the marrow of my bones like I was nothing but a hollow pipe. For them to crawl through the doorway and the stone swallowed the figures as they surged. Arms too long, bodies bending at impossible angles, and I stumbled backward until my shoulders hit the hood of my car, the metal vibrating like it was alive, like the engine was still running even though I had shut it off. When I looked through the windshield, I saw the dash lights flicker in rhythm with the chant, like the machine itself had become part of the chorus, like there was no separation anymore between me and the car and the chamber. We were all woven together. We wanted to run, to climb back inside and slam the doors, to reverse into that tunnel even if the walls crushed me. But when I grabbed the handle of the driver's side door, my skin burned, the metal too hot to touch. I jerked my hand back, skin red and blistered, and that was when I realized they weren't going to let me leave, not through that car, not through that tunnel, not through anything that looked like an exit, because exits didn't exist here. This place only opened one way, and that way was down. The figures pressed closer, their forms rippling in the firelight that wasn't fire, their edges blurring like they were both there and not, and every head tilted to the same impossible angle, waiting, inviting. I could feel that pull in my chest again, the strings tightening, dragging me step by step toward them, and though my legs shook, I couldn't stop them from moving. I couldn't anchor myself. It was like being dragged by a tide stronger than anything human when I crossed the threshold. The world shifted, the air went cold enough to freeze the breath in my throat, and the darkness inside wasn't just absence of light. It was a substance, heavy and thick, brushing against my skin like cobwebs soaked in oil, clinging to every inch of me. And deeper inside, I saw more carvings etched into the stone walls, glowing faint like embers. Runes that bend if I looked too long, symbols that seemed to move. When I blinked, and though I had never studied them, I understood them, not in words, but in feelings, in memories that weren't mine, as if the marks themselves had been branded into my blood long before tonight's chant built again, louder, layered, shaking the stone under my boots. And ahead the passage widened into another chamber larger than the first, a cavern with a ceiling so high the light never touched it. In the center rose something I can't describe without failing, a structure or a body or both. Columns that looked like bones fused together, surfaces that glistened wet, pulsing faint as though blood still moved inside them, and the figures all turned their tilted heads toward it in unison. Voices rising, arms lifted in worship, and I knew I was being led to that thing, that altar. That corpse that breathed, he stopped dead, dug my my heels into the stone. Fought the pull with everything I had because I knew if I took one more step closer, I'd never come back, not as me, not as the person who had walked into Craggy Gardens at sunset. And for a moment the pull relented, just for a flicker, enough for me to draw a breath that was my own. And in that breath I heard something else faint cutting through the chant. Not outside but inside me, a voice that wasn't a hum. A voice that sounded like my own but younger, clearer, whispering that this wasn't the first time I staggered. Heart racing because the words landed heavy, not as revelation but as recognition. Like remembering the end of a dream you've had before, and flashes hit me in quick bursts. Images of walking this same path in different clothes, with different shoes, different seasons, seeing the same runes, the same tilted heads over and over. And each time I had forgotten. Each time the memory had been scraped away like bark peeled from a tree, only for me to find myself back here again. Another October, another dusk. Another Trailhead tried to fight it, tried to deny it, but the images burned behind my eyes, my own. Face reflected in the stone wall, stretched and twisted. Not once but dozens of times, hundreds maybe, all with the same hollow stare. All whispering the same broken prayer, not for me, not for me. But I knew then it had always been for me. That every step had been leading back to this place, that the trailhead wasn't a beginning but a loop. I had been circling it longer than I could comprehend. Figures parted then, clearing a path straight to the altar, their heads tilting back as one, mouths opening wider than any human mouth should. And the sound that poured out wasn't a chant anymore, it was a roar, deep and layered, shaking the chamber so heart chunks of stone cracked and fell, and the altar thing pulsed faster, its surface splitting open to reveal something glimmering inside, something that looked like an eye bigger than my body staring straight through me. And when its gaze locked onto mine, the hum ceased, the voices cut, everything went silent except for the pounding of my heart. That silence was worse than the roar. It was the silence of being noticed, of being measured, and in that moment I realized all of this. Every step, every mile of twisted parkway, every figure in the shadows, it had all been about getting me here, standing in front of that eye, and whatever it was had been waiting, patient, endless, for me to finally remember what I had promised. Long agate stone floor cracked under my boots, lines racing out from where I stood, runes flaring bright along them, and the chamber shook like it was waking, dust raining down from above, and the figures fell to their knees as one, arms stretched toward me, chanting again, but now not in worship of the altar, not of the eye, but of me. My name pouring from their mouths over and over, layered and distorted, shaking the marrow of my bones until I couldn't tell if I was still standing or if I had already fallen in that moment of chaos. But the earth splitting and the air vibrating and the eye staring straight into me, I felt something deep inside split open like a wound that had never healed, finally tearing wide. And what spilled out wasn't blood, it was memory, it was knowledge. It was the understanding that I hadn't stumbled into this by accident. I had come back because I belonged here. Because whatever this thing was, it wasn't choosing me now. It had chosen me long before I ever breathed. The memory that split through me wasn't like remembering a birthday or a childhood smell. It was like someone had shoved a floodgate wide open and every life I had lived came pouring through at once. I saw myself in 100 different seasons, walking up that same trail, sometimes with friends who never made it back. Sometimes alone, sometimes with gear that belonged to decades before I was even born. And every single time it ended here in this chamber at this altar staring into that eye. And every single time I forgot because forgetting was part of the deal. Forgetting was the only way. I would come back willingly again, thy pulse once heavy like the beat of a drum. And the light that spilled from it wasn't light at all. It was liquid, or maybe both. It poured over me in waves that burned and froze at the same time. And the moment it touched me, the figures dropped lower, pressing their faces to the stone, chanting harder. My name stretched and warped until it wasn't a name anymore. It was a sound, a vibration, a key, and the runes in the floor flared brighter. With each syllable, me skin crawled under the weight of that light. I watched the veins in my arms swell dark and thick like black rivers beneath the surface. My hand shook as the nails lengthened sharper, not claws, not quite, but enough to scratch grooves in the stone when I clenched my fists, and the hum inside me wasn't just inside anymore. It was coming out in threads of sound visible in the air like heat shimmer rising from asphalt. Only these threads wrapped around me and tugged like reins, pulling me closer to the altar. Wanted to scream that I wasn't theirs, that I wasn't part of this, but when I opened my mouth, nothing human came out, only the same layered voices I had heard in the woods, the same chorus that had stalked my steps, and the sound echoed off the chamber walls and came back bigger, multiplied until it drowned even my own thoughts. And in the cracks of silence between the roars, I heard that younger version of me again, faint and fragile, whispering to stop whispering, that there was still a chance to turn away. I latched onto that whisper like it was a rope in floodwater, and I forced my legs to stumble. Back one step, then another, the strings of light pulling harder, the figures shrieking in unison, like animals cut open, but the eye kept its gaze fixed on me, unblinking, unending. And the more distance I tried to put between us, the more the chamber bent, the walls sliding, the floor tilting, until no matter which way I moved, every path turned me back toward that altar. The smell of rot grew thicker, the air wet and heavy. I realized it wasn't just rot, it was breath. The thing inside that altar was breathing, and with every inhale the chamber pulled tighter, and with every exhale runes flared brighter, and the figures lifted their heads in time, their mouths opened to wide, as if trying to match the breath of their god. And I felt my own lungs sensing to my chest, rising and falling against my will, until I wasn't breathing for myself anymore. I was breathing for each, staggered to the side, slammed into the wall, and my hands brushed against one of the glowing runes, and for an instant the hum faltered like feedback cut from a speaker, and I felt a crack of air that was mine alone, a breath that belonged only to me, and I pressed harder, scraping my burned hand against the carving, and the glow flared white, searing my palm, but giving me another half second of silence. And in that silence I heard the whisper again, louder this time, not younger but older, an echo of me that had resisted once before. The figures shrieked higher, their forms unraveling like smoke torn by wind, their long arms flailing, their heads twisting in violent jerks, and the eye pulsed harder, its surface splitting again, and through the cracks I saw not just light, but shapes moving behind it, something fast shifting like continents breaking and reforming, and the terror that filled me wasn't fear of death, it was fear of being absorbed. Fear of being dissolved into that endless movement until there was nothing left of me. I pressed my palm against the roan again harder, even though the flesh was blistering, the stink of burning skin filling the air, and the white flare lit the chamber bright enough to blind me for a breath. In that light I saw another door on the far side, small, narrow, not black like the first, but pale. Stone rough cut like it had been carved by hand, not by whatever had made the altar. And the faintest edge of my hearing, past the hum, past the chanting, I heard voices different from the others calling my name, not layered, not warped, just human. Voices urgent, desperate, like they were trying to pull me through. He lurched toward that doorway. The pull of the strings tightening, the figures screeching, the altar shaking, dust raining down in heavy sheets. But with every step I dragged my ruined hand along the wall, scraping it across the rooms, flaring them one by one. And every flare broke the hum just long enough to move my body forward another pace. And the voices beyond the pale door grew louder, clearer, and though I couldn't make out the words, the tone was enough, pleading, commanding, telling me not to stop. The altar roared behind me, the eye-blazing cracks splitting wider until liquid light poured onto the floor, racing toward me like a flood, and the figures broke from there. Positions, arms clawing their forms, unraveling into smoke and bone, but still moving, still reaching their long fingers, scraping the stone inches from my back. I threw myself at the doorway, the pale light swallowing me whole. For a moment I thought I had escaped the chamber, that I had broken whatever loop bound me there. But when my eyes adjusted, I realized I was standing on a narrow ledge overlooking a cavern, even bigger than the one behind the altar, and far below on the floor of that cavern were hundreds, maybe thousands of people, not figures, not shadows, but people in torn hiking gear, in ranger uniforms and jeans and jackets, all of them standing perfectly still. All of them with their heads tilted at the same angle, their eyes empty, their mouths moving in silence as if rehearsing a chant that hadn't started yet. And then every single one of those heads turned up toward me, and though no sound left their mouths, I heard them inside my skull, layered with my own voice over and over again, and they all whispered the same thing in perfect rhythm: you always come back. When all those faces tilted up at me, my knees almost gave out, because it wasn't just strangers down there, it was me too, over and over, my own face caught in different slices of time, hair longer or shorter, different jackets, different ages, but every single one with the same hollow eyes and the same silent moving mouth, whispering you always come back. And when I leaned forward over the ledge, I saw the way their jaws moved in perfect sync, like marionettes pulled by one hand. The cavern felt endless, the ceiling lost in shadows, the walls slick with veins of that glowing stone. In the far distance I could make out other ledges, other doorways like the one I had stumbled through, each of them spilling out more figures just like me, frozen in rows across the stone floors, all staring up, waiting. And I realized this wasn't just a place beneath Craggy Gardens. This wasn't just some hidden chamber. This was a hive, and I was standing in the middle of it. Voices rattled in my skull so loud I clamped my hands over my ears. But it didn't help. The whisper came from inside, deeper than hearing, and the words began to shift. Not just "you always come back," but "we are always here, we are always waiting." And as they layered and layered, I felt the strings pull again, harder than before, tugging me forward, urging me to step off the ledge and join them. Ruined hand throbbed raw where the roan had branded it. When I looked down, I saw the marks still glowing, etched into my skin like a permanent scar, and with every pulse it gave me a fraction of resistance, like a splinter of silence cutting through the chorus, and I used that silence to step back one pace from the edge, my boots scraping stone dust into the abyss. But the crowd below reacted like animals starved, their jaws snapping open, their mouths tearing wider, their throats vibrating. But no sound came out, and the cavern filled with a pressure that shoved against my chest. The ledge shook and cracks split along the stone, and I knew if I didn't move I'd be swallowed whole, either by falling or by joining that mass. And at the far end of the ledge, I saw another arch, another tunnel, pale like the first, only narrower and darker, and something in me screamed not to trust it, that every door was just another mouth and the same beast. But the whisper in my head, the one that had sounded like me, but not warped, was urging me to go, telling me it was the only way out, telling me to move before the ledge broke completely. So I ran. I forced my legs to move, even though each step dragged like I was wading through tar. The figures below lunged upward. They never left the ground, their heads snapping back and forth, too fast to follow, their arms stretching high, their fingers bending at sharp angles. The strings pulling at me yanked so hard I almost toppled forward. But I clutched my glowing hand to my chest and pushed harder. The tunnel swallowed me, quick, tight stone pressing both sides, damp and cold, the air heavy with that same rot breath, and I could still hear them behind me, whispering, still see their hollow eyes every time I blinked. But the further I went, the thinner the sound became, until at last all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the scraping of my boots on slick rock. The tunnel opened into a slope that curved upward, faint daylight bleeding in from some unseen crack above, and for the first time since the parkway I felt air that smelled like air, sharp with leaves, wet with mountain fog. My chest filled with it, greedy, desperate, like I hadn't breathed for days. I scrambled toward it, half crawling, half climbing, my palms slipping raw on the rock, until at last I burst through a narrow fissure in the hillside and collapsed onto wet grass. When I lifted my head, the sky above was gray, streaked with orange, the last bleed of sunset dying over the ridges, and the Blue Ridge Parkway stretched quiet in the distance. No cars, no lights, just that familiar winding road, and for a heartbeat I believed I was free. I believed I had escaped. But then I looked at my hands, and the scar from the roan still burned bright, the glow seeping through the skin, pulsing with my heartbeat. I realized nothing had ended. He staggered to my feet, every bone shaking, my body filthy with blood and dust, and when I turned I saw the fissure behind me, still gaping, still breathing, faint trails of black smoke curling out, and I heard it faint but undeniable, the hum still echoing in the stone deep beneath my boots, as if the hive had only closed its eyes, not fallen asleep. He stumbled down toward the parkway, moving without aim, just desperate to put distance between me and that fissure. And when I reached the shoulder of the road, I stopped cold, because part as if it had just arrived. Was my car same spot, same angle, lights flickering faint, though the keys weren't in my pocket anymore. And when I looked through the windshield, I swore I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, someone with my face staring blank and hollow, just like the crowd below. He backed away, shaking my head, refusing it, whispering, "No, no, no." But the figure in the driver's seat lifted, its hand slowly pressing its palm against the glass, and though it was too far to see detail, I knew without doubt that the mark burned on its skin to glowing just like mine. When it opened its mouth, I didn't hear anything in the air, but inside my skull the whisper came back stronger than ever. "You always come back." You ran then. I don't know how far, maybe a mile, maybe more, the road winding, empty, the night bleeding darker over the ridges, and no matter how far I went, every curve, the road, every overlook, every mile marker looked the same as the last, like I was running in circles, like the parkway itself had folded around me. And the further I pushed, the louder the hum became in my chest, until I had to stop bent double on the asphalt, shaking with exhaustion. When I lifted my head, headlights glared in the distance. A car approaching, slow and steady, and for a split second hope flared. Maybe it was a ranger, maybe someone who could pull me out of this. But when the car drew closer, I recognized the shape, my car again sliding smooth around the bend, and the figure behind the wheel staring straight ahead, eyes hollow, skin pale, glowing hand pressed to the steering wheel. And when it passed me, the window rolled down and my own voice spilled into the night, layered and wrong, telling me to get inside, telling me I was tired, telling me it was time to come back. I didn't get inside. I bolted into the tree line instead, crashing through underbrush so thick it tore at my arms, branches whipping my face, every step heavier than the last. Behind me the hum followed, not just in my chest but in the ground itself, pulsing like a heartbeat in the roots of the forest. And I swear every tree bent slightly as I passed, like they were leaning toward me, like they knew I was supposed to stop. Night swallowed me fast, the parkway lights fading behind the ridges, and though I ran blind, I didn't trip, my feet landing sure on rocks and roots I had never seen, but somehow remembered. And that scared me more than the shadows, because it meant I knew this way. It meant I had come this way before, and as the thought sank in, I realized the trail under my boots wasn't random. It was a path, narrow but worn, carved by countless steps, all leading deeper into the mountainy. Burst into a small clearing, and for a moment I froze, because there was a fire in the center, low and steady, and around it sat three people bundled in jackets. Their backpacks leaned against stones like any late-night campout on the parkway, and they all turned their heads toward me at once, eyes wide, startled. And one of them, one in maybe mid-30s, lifted a hand and called out, asking if I was okay, if I was lost. I almost sobbed with relief, because their voices were normal, plain. No layering, no hum. Stumbled toward them, words catching in my throat, trying to explain that something was wrong, that something was chasing me. And they stood quick, nervous, but not afraid, just concerned, like any strangers would be. And one of the men stepped forward, reaching to steady me, and when his hand brushed my shoulder, I realized I was trembling so hard my teeth clicked. But then his eyes flicked down to my hand, and he froze mid-step. The glow was still there, burning faint through the blistered skin. When he saw it, his face drained pale, and he yanked his hand back, and muttered something sharp under his breath too quick for me to catch, and the woman saw it too, her mouth twisting like she recognized it, like she had seen it before. And suddenly all three of them looked different, not strangers anymore, but witnessed whispered to each other fast, low voices almost drowned by the crackle of the fire. But I caught fragments, words like mark and loop and not ready, and my heart kicked hard. Because they knew what this was. They weren't surprised, they were expecting it, and when I demanded to know who they were, their heads all turned to me in perfect unison, and the woman stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on mine, and said, "You shouldn't have touched the stone." Her voice broke something in me because it was calm, not horrified, not angry, just sad, final. Like she had been waiting to say it for a long time, and before I could ask again, she pointed past me into the trees, and I turned and saw the glow spreading between the trunks, a dozen sets of eyes low to the ground, staring wide, unblinking, and the hum surged so strong the fire bent sideways. As if caught in a storm, the campers didn't scream, they didn't run. Instead, they began packing, quick, deliberate movements, throwing dirt over the fire, strapping their packs tight, and one of the men shoved something into my chest. A rough cloth bundle, small and heavy, and he told me not to drop it, not to open it, just carry it and keep moving. And I wanted to ask what it was, but the glow was closer now, shapes moving between the trees, tall and bent, and when I looked back, the three of them were already gone, melted into the forest like shadows, never there at all. I clutched the bundle tight, the cloth damp against my palm, and ran again. The hum chasing harder, the shapes breaking branches behind me, their long arms scraping bark. And no matter how fast I went, they stayed just behind, close enough for me to hear the hiss of their breaths, but not close enough to grab me like they were hurting me, pushing me somewhere. The forest tilted, then the ground sloping steep downward. I lost my footing, sliding through mud and rock until I spilled out into another clearing. This one bare and wide, the grass pressed flat in spirals, like something massive had coiled there. In the center was a stone marker, chest high, carved with the same runes that had branded my hand, only deeper, sharper. And when I stumbled close, the mark on my skin blazed in response to the bundle pulsed, warm against my chest, and without meaning to, I unwrapped a corner and saw what was inside, a shard of stone, jagged black vein with faint light humming on its own. And the moment I exposed it, the clearing shifted, the spiral grass flattening further, the air thickening until it felt like trying to breathe underwater. And the figures stopped at the tree line, their tilted heads swaying side to side, as if waiting them change, pitch higher, sharper, cutting straight into my skull, and I dropped to my knees, clutching the shard tighter even as it seared my palm. And in that agony I understood what the campers had meant by not ready, because the shard wasn't a weapon, it was a key. And holding it meant I wasn't just prey anymore, I was part of its stone marker, split down the center like a door opening. From the gap poured that same pale smoke, coiling and writhing, and inside I glimpsed a staircase spiraling down into nothing, and the figures at the tree line began to bow, their long bodies folding low, arms stretching to the ground, and in their whispers I heard my own voice again, urging me to go down, telling me this was the way, this was the return. Wanted to throw the shard away, I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me, my legs rising slow, steady, carrying me toward that stair, and the closer closer I got, the more the scar on my hand flared, the light spilling up my arm, crawling across my chest, and face branding me whole until I wasn't sure where my skin ended and the stone began. And in that blur of pain I realized the truth. I wasn't carrying the key, I was the key. The stair pulled me whether I wanted it or not, each step dragging under my boots. Like the stone itself was moving me down, and the shard burned hotter in my hand until I swore I could hear it hissing, the glow crawling up my wrist, across my shoulder, down my spine like veins of fire threading through my body. And the hum wasn't just sound anymore. It was rhythm, it was heartbeat sensing to mine, forcing my lungs to inhale, exhale in perfect time until I couldn't tell if I was breathing or if something else was breathing. Meth spiral closed tighter, the smoke pressing against my face, damp and heavy, tasting like wet earth and rust. And beneath it all, something sweet, cloying like rotting fruit. And the further I went, the louder the whispers became, not behind me, not above, but rising from below, thousands of voices stacked together, layered in waves. And every one of them my own voice, every pitch, every age, some raw with panic, some calm, some resigned, and all of them saying the same words over and over. You are the key, you are the key, you are the key. The stone walls shivered with each repetition, the runes glowing bright enough to burn spots into my eyes. And when I blinked, I saw flashes of the cavern again, the thousands of hollow faces looking up, their mouths moving in silence. And I realized they hadn't disappeared. When I escaped the fissure, they had simply shifted here, waiting at the bottom for me to arrive again, because this was the loop, this was the only. And then she tried to stop. I planted my feet against the stair, but the steps seemed to move beneath me, like an escalator dragging me further down, no matter how hard I fought. And the shard pulsed in my hand in rhythm with the stair, each drop shoving me lower. And when I tried to hurl it away, my fingers wouldn't release it, my knuckles locked white. The shard fused to me now, as much a part of my hand as the scar that burned across my palm. Stair ended in a chamber so vast I couldn't see the far walls, the ceiling lost in black smoke, and in the center a pit open, wide edges, lined with jagged stone, glowing with the same runes carved deep and alive. And from the pit rose a column of that pale smoke, twisting high into the dark, but then its shape swam, shifting too large to belong in any place that could be real wings or arms, or something else entirely, folding and unfolding like shadows, turning inside out. At the heart of it pulsed an eye larger than the chamber itself, glowing wet and raw, staring down through the smoke directly at meth shard in my hand, split open like fruit rotting from the inside, and light poured out, wrapping around my wrist, binding up my arm until I was tethered to the pit. And the voices swelled louder, cheering or begging, I couldn't tell. And the smoke surged outward, crawling across the floor, coiling around my ankles, pulling me closer inch by inch. And the figures appeared again, on the edges of the chamber, heads, tilted mouths wide, their silent chorus pressing into my skull, until I thought it would split. I blinked once, slow and heavy, and the runes across the chamber flared white, and I dropped to my knees. From the force of it, my body shaking as though every bone wanted to leap free of my skin. And in that moment a memory slammed through me, sharp and clear, not a dream, not a vision, but a fact. I had stood here before countless times, I had knelt in this chamber over and over, and each time I had given an end. Each time I had forgotten, but this time the shard in my hand had made remembering possible. I realized remembering was the punishment. Remembering was the lock snapping shut, the smoke coiled higher, wrapping around my chest, pressing tight until I couldn't draw a breath, and the eye leaned closer, the air vibrating heavy. I felt something tear loose inside me, not flesh, not bone, but something deeper. It rose out of my mouth, and a rush of light streaming into the smoke, threading into the eye, and the roar that followed wasn't sound. It was vibration, rattling the chamber, rattling my skull, rattling every memory I had, until I wasn't sure what belonged to me and what belonged to the hive. Then in the middle of that roar, I heard it again, faint, fragile, the whisper that had followed me from the first chamber. The voice that had sounded like me but different, and it said, "Not yet." And the shard in my hand split further, the pieces crumbling, but the glow inside flared brighter than ever, stabbing into the smoke, into the eye, and the figures at the edges shrieked their forms, unraveling into strips of black, and the chamber convulsed, stone cracking, raining dust, and breath smoke recoiled, writhing, the eye snapping shut, and for the first time I felt the pull release my chest, my arms, my legs, free enough to stumble back. And the floor split wide beneath me, the pit gaping larger, swallowing stone. And the rush of air pulled me down faster than falling, and I knew this. This was the end, no loop, no escape, just a fall, the last thing I saw. Before the dark swallowed me whole was a reflection of my own face in the surface of the smoke, staring up from the pit, pale and hollow and glowing with the same mark. And that reflection smiled, not cruel, not kind, just inevitable, and mouthed the same words I had heard since the beginning: "You always come back." Fall didn't feel like falling, it felt like being swallowed, the smoke folding around me thick and alive, dragging me deeper and deeper until the idea of up and down lost meaning, and all that remained was the endless pull and the roar inside. I sculled, but when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in darkness anymore. I was standing on asphalt, cracked, wet under a thin mist, and when I looked around, I saw the mile marker for Craggy Gardens, the overlook sign leaning under the weight of ivy, and the clock on my phone said 6:42 p.m. October 21st, 1998. I staggered back, almost dropping the shard, though it was nothing but dust now, faint glow seeping from the cracks between my fingers. I stared at the date, my chest heaving, because I was barely a teenager, then still in middle school, still years away from even getting my license. But here I was standing in clothes torn and burned, my body older, my hands scarred with the roan, and the parkway around me silent, empty like it had been. Waiting thumb was still there, faint under the asphalt like a second heartbeat. When I turned, I saw headlights in the distance rolling smooth along the curve, and for a moment thought maybe it was someone real, maybe a chance to break free. But as the car drew closer, I saw it again, my own car, the same dent on the fender, the same cracked headlight crawling up the road slow and steady, and when it pulled up beside me, the window rolled down and my own face leaned out, younger this time, maybe 20, maybe earlier, his skin smooth, his eyes bright but hollow underneath, and he smiled at me with that inevitable curve and said, "Get in, we're going back." I stumbled away, shaking my head, whispering no over and over, my scar burning hot, as fire, but the younger version kept pace with the car creeping beside me. The door unlocked, the passenger seat open, and every time I turned my head, another car appeared behind it, another version of me, older, younger, gone furious, calm, all lined along the parkway, headlights glaring through the mist until the road stretched with nothing but myself staring back, thumb thickened into a jet layered and heavy. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but it didn't help the sound pouring from inside and all the voices, all my own whispering together. We are always here. We are always waiting, and though I tried to scream, I realized my throat was moving with theirs. I was chanting to my mouth, repeating the words even as my mind begged to stop. The mist swallowed the ridges, the sky bleeding into night, too fast, unnatural. And the cars one by one pulled off the road, their doors opening, my double stepping out boots crunching on gravel, every one of them tilting their heads at the same angle, every one of them glowing with the same scar. And they began to circle me, slow, steady arms rising in rhythm with the hum. And when I looked into their faces, I saw not strangers, not threats, but inevitabilities, each one a path I had already walked, each one waiting to fold back into math, circle tighten my chest heaving, my vision blurring. In the distance down the parkway I saw the fissure again, black smoke rising, curling into the sky, and I knew that no matter how many times I ran, no matter how many lives I lived, it would always lead back here to the parkway, to the fissure, to the hive, and I would always fall, always remember too late, always return. Because the mark wasn't something I carried, it was what I waced. Doubles lean in their voices, fusing into one vast roar, shaking the ground. And the last thing I remember before the mist swallowed everything was their mouths moving in perfect sync, their voices filling the hollow of my skull, whispering not just you always come back, but you never